In introducing our luncheon keynote, I find myself saying the obvious. No process is more central to scholarly communication than peer review. Yet changes in scholarship, the economies of higher education, and international competition for quality publishing opportunities are challenging the very purpose of peer review, quality assurance. Our speaker today, Diane Harley, is a researcher who directs the Higher Education in the Digital Age project at the Center for Studies in Higher Education at Berkeley. At CSHE, she has created and directed research initiatives focusing on the policy implications of integrating information and communication technologies into complex academic environments. Dr. Harley is a biosocial anthropologist with a PhD in anthropology from Berkeley. Her approach emphasizes the concurrent analysis of social, economic, and academic costs and benefits of the new media in scholarship. She's recently been working on the Open and Affordable Textbooks project and is co-principal investigator with Mellon Money on a project investigating the future of scholarly communication. Please welcome Diane Harley.
Thank you very much, Nancy, and for the entire committee and the university for inviting me here today. Let's see if I can get this going. I'm going to keep it scripted because I'm a selfish speaker and I really enjoy getting your input and feedback in a decent Q&A, and I hope I can pique some interest in your minds and generate some questions. Everything I'm going to be talking about today, most of it is published. I'm going to be talking about a project on peer review that we're just in the last throes of getting ready to publish, but it's all online and open access, and you can get it at this website, and I think Joe and his crew have made the links available from various places. I do a lot of work around users, students, faculty, the public as well, but primarily academic environments. And I always think it's important when somebody gives you money to think about why you're using that money to do what you're going to do. And so I always think it's important to ask, why study users? Why do we care? And I really think I've been in this business of looking at technology and higher education now for more than 15 years. And I've seen a lot of technologies come and go. I've seen a lot of hype and fads. I've seen a lot of money spent on technologies when people didn't really spend a whole lot of time asking about the end user, and therefore the technology sometimes didn't live up to its promise. Now, this particular project I'm going to talk about today is part of something we call the Future of Scholarly Communication project. We've been at it for more than 5 years. It's been generously funded by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. I'm part of a team, but I am the lead on the team, and I need to give due credit for what has been an extensive amount of work and a lot of very collaborative and productive teamwork. I'm going to talk about academic values and scholarly communication practices, and of the theme, why study users? Well, the first place you need to start is to talk to scholars. We distinguish between archival publishing and what we call in-progress publishing. And to go to Heather's, the ecosphere or ecosystem, scholarly communication is not just about archival publication. It's about every single way scholars communicate about their research, from the first embryonic idea to the last publication, and then to the dialogue that can follow the publication. I'm an anthropologist, I'm not a publisher, I'm not a librarian, I'm not an advocate for any particular worldview. I have my own personal views of this domain, but I do not let that get in the way of my research and letting scholars talk to us and tell us what they value. I use an empirical approach There are no bad results if you do good research. Facts are needed to create good policy and workable solutions, even if you don't like the facts. The motivations and the approach that we take, one of the central questions, really in all the work that we've done, is the lack of willingness of the faculty to change the key barrier to moving to more cost-effective publishing models. And I put open access in parentheses there, because there are many cost-effective publishing models that may not be what we think of as open access and free right from the get-go. Or is it something else happening? But do we always have to say the faculty, if we could just change the faculty, we would live in a perfect world? So we wanted to assess the criteria by which faculty decide when and in what venues to communicate the results of scholarly research at all stages. We want to think about, and we have analyzed, what roles universities and faculty play in the resolution of the perceived crisis of scholarly communication. And I put perceived in quotes because many faculty we talked to had no perception of a crisis in scholarly communication. You know, they turn on their computer, they get everything they want, they can download the universe, so what's to complain about? Their students get published in the best places, they publish in the best places, so they're a bit removed sometimes from what librarians, for example, and administrators have to deal with in terms of the escalating costs of the whole scholarly communication system. Lastly, one of our primary premises is that disciplinary traditions and culture matter, and you have to honor those differences. We see a dichotomous situation, and have since we started this project. Electronic forms of print and other publications are consumed heavily. The perceptions and the realities of the reward system lead to a strong adherence to conventional, high-stature print publications as record for reporting research and having it evaluated institutionally. Promotion depends predominantly upon final, fully peer-reviewed, archival publication. Now, you and I know in the arts and the professional schools, there are many different practices, and that's why I think it is important to think about how different disciplines and different domains evaluate their concept of scholarship, because we can see models right next door, even if we don't talk to people next door. There are models under the same roof of the university of many different ways of communicating scholarship. Making a reputation is also dependent on where one publishes, and in-progress communication activities, including conferences, service, and so on, are very important to the whole process. So someone once told me when they asked me to give a talk, they said, well, you don't have to talk about your methods. I said, well, actually, I do. Because if people are going to make an assessment of what I'm reporting, they need to know how I got that information. So I need to tell you what our biases are. We focus primarily, almost exclusively, on research universities. We looked at across 45 mostly elite institutions, so this is not all Berkeley-based, nationally and internationally. We talked in a formal way through interviews with 160 plus scholars. We looked at 12, we created 12 disciplinary case studies. We did a very significant literature review, and I personally and my team, but me in particular, I do daily environmental scans, news, listserv, blogs, Twitter announcements, and so on. So in addition to the formal data gathering that we do, and I'm a social scientist, this particular project is qualitative social science, we do an awful lot of other fact-finding. We started with a planning project. We looked at 5 disciplines: anthropology, biostatistics, chemical engineering, law, and economics, not the hybrid discipline, and English language literature. The more intense project, which began in 2007 and actually has morphed into more work, I'm still working on it, we looked at astrophysics, archaeology, biology, economics, history, music, and political science. We did not pull these disciplines out of a hat. We spent a good many months doing lay of the land interviews, thinking about, if we're going to invest this energy, what are the most interesting disciplines we could look at that would give us some sense of trajectories of scholarly communication? over time? What are some interesting practices? How do scientists do their work? What are the tools they're using? What are the challenges they are facing in terms of data analysis, the data deluge, and so on? There is no perfect set of disciplines. We focused on diversity, attributes, and affordances. As I said, our informants were primarily faculty, range of seniority, tenured, pre-tenure, postdocs, grad students, many, many high-level administrators, editors, publishers, and librarians. I will tell you, when you say I interviewed faculty, if you throw a dart at a faculty member, chances are you've also hit an administrator, an editor of a scholarly journal, often a librarian. So you get a lot of twofers when you talk to faculty. We also sampled a variety of grand challenge initiatives, that is very highly interdisciplinary, exploratory initiatives, and then many more formal and informal conversations, such as, I've gone to a lot of meetings such as this. We use a structured interview protocol, and here are the 7 very broad areas that we focused on. To give you a sense of the scope of this project, one of my postdocs had 2 children over the course of this project. It's a 700-page report, one of the reports that have been generated, because we developed very thickly described case studies of the particular disciplines that we looked at. It's published up on a platform, a repository called eScholarship, which is hosted by the University of California. We've sliced and diced it so that scholars and librarians and just interested people could drill down, say, into archaeology or to astrophysics. And as one of my postdocs, Sophia Akert, said, we tracked, after we published it, we tracked where it was popping up, and it's very easy to do now with the internet, right? You Google, lots of different interesting tools. And she said it's like watching red dye slip through the system. We'd get these weird editorials in the Journal of Genetics or, some astrophysics. So it was really very interesting to see how this had bled into the disciplines via our dissemination activities, and also because we gave the report to everybody who we interviewed. So tenure and promotion, making a name. What are the criteria for disseminating your research at various stages? Publication practices, new publication outlets, new genres. Sharing. With whom, when, why, or why not? And sharing was a particularly important question for me to ask, because I'm always trying to think about, well, here's the new thing. And so go back to 2006, it's Web 2.0, we're all going to just throw it out there, and it's going to be great, and information will be free, and everybody's just going to share. Well, yeah, maybe. So I spent a lot of time thinking about sharing. We asked a lot of questions about sharing. Collaboration was another topic that we investigated, that we interrogated. With whom, when, why, or why not? What resources do you create and consume? What are your needs? How do you engage with the public? Why do you do it? When do you do it? Why or why not do you do it? And then just blue sky. What's the future of your discipline look like around all of these questions? So what I'm going to talk today is going to be just really skimming the surface of some of the results that we've found. I'm going to start at the end. And the end was we identified a number of faculty needs. One, the development of more nuanced tenure and promotion practices that do not rely exclusively on the imprimatur of the publication or easily gamed citation metrics. A re-examination of the locus, mechanisms, timing, and meaning of peer review. Competitive, high-quality, and affordable journals and monograph publishing platforms with strong editorial boards, peer review, and sustainable business models. New models of publication that can accommodate arguments of varied length, rich media, and embedded links to data, plus institutional assistance to manage permissions of copyrighted material. This is a particular problem in some fields. Art history, music was one of our fields. It's really scandalous, some of the research that can't be done because of copyright. And I don't mean ceding one's or retaining one's copyright of their own publication, but including copyrighted material in publication. And then finally, support for managing and preserving new research methods and products, including components of natural language processing, visualization, complex distributed databases, and GIS, among many others. This should have a big dollar sign after it, because this is going to be a very expensive process for the Academy to deal with. Not just publishers who are going to have to expend money to do this, but the Academy is also going to have to spend money to manage this really incredibly complex set of media and data types that will become embedded in publication. Okay, I'd like to run through the fields if I could. Scholars of all stripes use a range of mechanisms for disseminating scholarship at various stages. Within any given discipline, there may be a variety of publishing strategies available to authors. But scholars in a field can name the top 3 to 5 journals or university presses without missing a beat. It's uncanny. Everybody knows where you need to publish. So let me start with physics, astrophysics, and mathematics, because why can't we just be like them? Why can't we just have an archive and we'll just, do all this pre-publication, and actually we can just get rid of journals? Well, it's not so easy. These are high paradigm fields. They have discipline-specific repositories, such as the archive. These repositories are essential outlets that exist alongside formal commercial and society-owned journals. The journals have not gone away. Many of these fields have massive databases, shared very expensive telescopes and satellites in astrophysics, depend on computation power, visualization, multiple authorship, often runs into the dozens. Economists and quantitative political scientists use working paper repositories such as SSRN and their own personal websites for disseminating research, but continue to rely heavily upon society and commercial journals for final archival publication. In economics in particular, there are exceptionally long lag times to publication. There are varied data sources. Some are proprietary. They cannot be shared. Sole or dual authorship is common. Publishers often require open data. In computer science, which was not one of our fields, but I've actually done a lot of work on computer scientists, and we did interview a number of computer scientists. Peer-reviewed conference proceedings are the most prestigious archival outlet. But distribution of scholarship using more open methods, such as posting on personal websites, is not uncommon. Software is a publication. Multiple authorship is common. My own scan of some of the more prestigious IEEE, ACM outlets is much of it's locked down. History and archaeology are fascinating fields, and they overlap to a great extent. And other fields of the humanities, such as languages and media studies, rely heavily on the book for long arguments. Journals are still very important as a means for disseminating short arguments, book reviews, and other communications. Rich media and graphics are becoming important. Maps, GIS, natural language processing. Sole authorship is the norm, period. Sharing data seems to be quite unusual. I'm always stunned that media studies is so beholden to the book. I would think of all the fields that this would be a field that you would see some experimentation in final publication, but they adhere quite strongly to the book. Musicology was one of the best choices we made in terms of the case. It includes art historical studies of Western music, computer composition, ethnomusicology, and music theory. And you can imagine there are multiple outlets used, ranging from books and critical editions to highly competitive and selected society journals, to encyclopedias, to MP3s, CDs, new instruments, and I mean new, creating new musical instruments, software, and network performances. However, sole authorship is often the norm. Finally, molecular and cell biology, and perhaps other sciences such as chemistry that are fast-moving, well-funded, highly competitive, and have commercial potential. There is much more limited range of outlets, although numerically many more journals in some subfields. And when I say more limited range of outlets, I mean the journal reigns. And if you don't want to publish journal articles and you want to be a biologist, my advice would be pick another field. In the same way, if you want to be a historian and you don't want to write books, I would say you might want to pick another field. And this emerged very, very early in our research. The journal article reigns in these fields, and the more prestigious the journal, the better, from the perspective of faculty at competitive institutions. Nature, Cell, Science, the former two being the enemy of reasonable cost, are the premier places to publish. They feature what was described to us as potato chip articles, salami sliced articles, the move to the smallest publishable unit. Lots of consternation about that. And that's a topic in and of itself. Some PLOS journals are rising in prestige. PLOS One, I have a big question mark about, and we could talk about that in the Q&A. Society journals were almost unanimously, and their scholar editors, not hired editors, not professional editors, but scholar editors, were the most trusted. Preprint servers are unheard of. Publication lags are exceptionally short. Large databases linked to publication are common. The importance of speed, visualization, replication, fraud detection can't be underestimated. And multiple authorship is the norm, and open data in genomics, et cetera, and so on. But they do not share publication before publication. They don't have a preprint culture, and I would venture a guess that they never will.
What is PLOS?
PLOS, the Public Library of Science, which was started by Harold Varmus, and it was funded by the Gordon Moore Foundation, and it's an open access journal. It's an author pays model, so you pay to have your journal published, but at publication, your article published, but at publication it's totally open access. It's expanded into, it's a science, Public Library of Science. It's expanded into, I don't know, you might know, Heather, how many different...
9 journals and PLOS One.
Yeah, 9 journals and PLOS One. And some of the journals are considered to be more prestigious than others. It's a model in process. It's not clear what the business model will be ultimately. Author pays, that's another, I don't want to get distracted by author pays, but I would love to talk about it, and I want to stay on track. I can give you a flavor of some of the tenure and promotion and peer review issues. Okay, we talked a lot about, what does it take to get tenure and promotion? We talked a lot of individuals who are deans and chairs and people who have been through the system. We talked to provosts, ex-presidents. A stellar publication record is important for tenure and promotion. Service, teaching, public engagement, they're important, but they are not the most important. However, age of the individual and the type of institution are variables that can affect that formula. What we heard about what a scholar needed to do to get tenure or to be promoted, their work is groundbreaking. It moves the field forward. Judged to be of high quality by internal and external reviewers, original, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not very quantitative. These are qualities that are assessed, they're claimed to be assessed, and that determine whether or not a scholar will get tenure and promotion. We heard a lot about quality over quantity. The metrics such as the impact factor are viewed with deep suspicion. As one individual said, bibliometrics is a deeply corrupt field which encourages individuals to work to the impact factor algorithms. It should be thrown out entirely. This is an ex-provost. Exceptions to the rules are made. There's a lot of filtering depending on the institution before someone is hired. Often it's determined before someone is hired whether or not there's going to be a good fit within the department. databases, excuse me, cell lines, critical additions, software. They're credited in tenure and promotion decisions, but they are rarely the sole criteria in most fields. You have to have that publication describing the telescope you've created. Assessing multiple authorship is a growing challenge. Interdisciplinary work can present a challenge as well to departmental and institutional committees. New journals, new genres are acceptable as long as they're peer-reviewed. So, when we started this project in 2005, I don't think we had the word peer review in any of our interview protocols. No, we didn't say, well, tell me about peer review. We had a whole lot of other questions. What do you think about open access? What do you need to do to get tenure and promotion? Why do you publish where you do? And we heard peer review, peer review, peer review, peer review, and peer review. It bubbled up. It was what scholars told us was of value. So how does peer review figure into the advancement process? There's a heavy reliance on peer-reviewed publications to aid institutions and tenure and promotion committees and external reviewers in the evaluation of scholarly work. In addition, external reviews are very important in tenure and promotion. One of the most damning things that can be said about a scholar is no one has ever heard of you. High impact publications are a way of making a name. So you've got this, if I publish in the right place, more people will know me, so on. Many worry that a lack of peer review is associated with newer, untested forms of publication, including open access, although we all know that that is not necessarily true. Concerns about author pays and gold open access, and I'd be happy to talk about that in the question and answer. What we heard is that the advancement process can and should be supportive and unprejudiced of non-traditional publishing models, provided that peer review is strongly embedded. The written policy is often new electronic genres should not be undervalued in consideration of advancement. So the question is, does actual practice vary? That's a very difficult thing to assess. But I can tell you what I do know is committees are not seeing many examples that deviate from the disciplinary norm. And that means young scholars are doing what their mentors do. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So peer review and promotion and publishing are separate but deeply intertwined. Concern that tenure and promotion committees rely too heavily on the proxy of imprimatur and citation metrics. As someone said, publication as a proxy for assessing scholarship follows from the exponential growth and resulting compartmentalization of knowledge across the academy, which has meant that individuals within a faculty can no longer effectively review the work of their peers, so they outsource it. These expectations of these 5 journals or 6 journal articles or 2 books for promotion in history, these expectations trickle down from research universities to aspirant institutions, particularly to teaching-intensive institutions. It's led to an explosion of low-quality publications, what some refer to as an arms race or an inflationary currency in scholarly communication, because people are churning out material just for tenure and promotion. This is we heard the worst examples of this are in the UK with the research assessment exercises, where money is doled out depending on research productivity. Research productivity is measured by how many publications a department has, and there you go down the rabbit hole. There has been a proliferation of publishing entities and journals. Some of the commercial presses are really good at generating new journals and charging a lot of money for them. It's basically, and then finally, peer review and reviewers are being swamped. So the more publications you have, the more need for peer review. People are being asked to peer review. People can't take the time to peer review. It's an economically unsustainable system. So I want to go back to peer review as being a driver of where faculty publish. It's the value. This is what we heard. This is not my view. This is what we heard. It's the value system supporting assessment of and perceived quality of research. It's the primary mechanism through which research quality is nurtured. It's the primary mechanism through which research is made both effective and efficient. And it's an excellent quality filter for the proliferating mass of scholarly information available on the web. It's simply more difficult for time-pressed scholars to sift through it all. This is going to get worse. Do we need more formal gatekeeping embodied in the current publishing system? Do we need other systems? You cannot, I mean, what we heard in terms of trusted publications being a way to filter out the noise that's available. We heard that again and again and again. We will be publishing in the next few months a project that we've been working on and a series of meetings we've had around peer review in publication and promotion. There's a website, and we've published a set of 4 working papers that are in draft form, and those have been expanded and much improved, and those will be published with this new publication. There are many perceived problems with peer review, but as Andrew Abbott, who's a sociologist of science, he's really very good. As he said, as long as there's been publication, there's been complaints about peer review. I mean, nobody's ever been happy with peer review. It's lack of speed, it's conservatism, it's bias. Low quality reviews, non-scholar editors who do triage when a journal article, for example, gets submitted, and they decide, well, this is sexy and this isn't, or I don't like this guy, or I do. And so there's a lot of concern about non-scholar editors, particularly in the sciences. Finding good reviewers can be a challenge. The system is overwhelmed. We heard this again and again and again. I'd love it if I'm wrong. By the way, if you have different experiences, I want to hear about them. It's exceptionally costly to the institution to subsidize peer review via faculty salaries, because as Heather pointed out and many others have pointed out, publishers might want to tell you that if the commercial publishers, one of their biggest arguments is, well, you know, we do peer review. Well, they really don't do peer review. They manage peer review, but they don't do the peer review. The people who do the peer review are the people in this room and in any number of universities all over the world that take their time, subsidized by university salaries, much of that is a taxpayer subsidy, to conduct the peer review. This is an expensive operation for universities to engage in. Citation metrics, you know, what is that? What's with that? So your article is in a particular journal that has a high impact factor, but it says nothing about the quality of your article, right? I mean, somebody's got to evaluate the quality of that article, which gets us back to you really need to have committees on campus, and external reviewers are going to read the work of faculty and not say, oh, it was published in Nature, it's got to be good. How do you know, here's this messy system. It's like democracy, and everybody hates it. There's nothing better. Well, there are lots of experiments. One flavor of experiments are open web-based peer review. So, yeah, why even, PLOS One is sort of like this. So why do all this upfront peer review and filtering? Well, why don't we just sort of, and there are lots of different ways to do this. You can just throw it out there on the web, see how people receive it, generate commentary. Well, frankly, there's really not been a whole lot of success with this so far. One of the reasons it goes back to this explosion of publication, the demands on the academy of conducting peer review, the sense that faculty are already overwhelmed, you know, that nice flat line of, you know, here's all the information and my little brain is still down here. So who has the time? On top of their formal requests for peer reviewing material, who has the time to sort of trawl the internet to say, well, you know, I think I'll just sort of spend a little time here and comment on this, you know, fellow's or gal's journal article or website. peer review in fraud and plagiarism detection. Does it work? Some people say it does, some people don't. The Mark Hauser, that's still unfolding, not really clear yet what happened there. Yeah, I mean, a lot of things get through the peer review system that shouldn't have gotten through the peer review system. Does that mean peer review never detects fraud and plagiarism? Probably not. One thing, Cliff Lynch, who is part of this series of meetings that we've had recently, commented on is the absolute explosion of publications coming out of Asia in particular. China, the very questionable quality of some of this material. Plagiarism is rampant. It's really an escalating problem. This is another burden on peer reviewers that are going to have to sift through even more publication, because nations are saying we've got to be competitive. We have to be competitive in research. The way to be competitive in research is to publish, publish, publish. The higher the prestige of the journal you publish in, the better. So again, you've got a system that is, it's scary, actually. I think with the explosion of information, people being overwhelmed, that there have to be ways to trust scholarship, and I don't know what the answers to that are. There's an interesting concept of generational paradigms that I'm not going to talk about. What are the faculty expectations of scholarly communication? They assume access to other scholarship will be provided, and the costs will be covered, for that access will be covered by the institution. They want relative speed to publication in the highest prestige outlets as possible, given the nature of what is being published and the targeted audience. Open access is not the issue for many. And I will tell you that when scholars make a decision to publish, they've got different kinds of publications. Some publications, they do want a highly prestigious, very, a general journal. Others, they know exactly who their audience is. It might be a very small audience, but that's the audience they want. They don't need to have the whole world look at it. So decisions about publication are really made on who's the audience I want to reach, and it's not always the world. Scholars don't want to slog through DREC, and they need peer review as a filtering mechanism. And they want their work protected from ripoff. That is, they must receive credit for the work that they do. They also want high-quality publications. They want high-quality editorial. They want high-quality production values. They want visibility and persistence for their best work. They also are increasingly going to want back-end data support. I want to just finish with a couple of notes about sharing and what we found there. We found that personality and disciplinary tradition were very, very important. Early half-baked work is universally not shared publicly. Scholars have to attain a certain level of excellence before they'll throw it out to the world. So this idea that somehow scholars are just going to be throwing stuff up willy-nilly, I think is not going to happen. Young scholars are especially conservative regarding sharing their work. What we found, and I think, and again, if you have had different experiences or you disagree, I would love to hear it. What we found is that there's a sharing first with a trusted circle of colleagues. A modicum of privacy is needed, so I send a draft to a colleague that I work with at another university, a colleague down the hall, a graduate student. Then there's sort of these widening concentric circles of sharing. So once it's gone through that level of vetting, many scholars said, I just want to make sure I'm not crazy with this idea. So I send it out to people who I feel safe with. Conferences, seminars, they were important, very important for feedback on scholarship. And we heard that the smaller the conference, the smaller the venue, the more intimate, the better for early work. Public posting of working papers, which is different from posting preprints and postprints. So the working paper, which is very well developed, the penultimate draft is published on a website or in a working paper repository. But those are not usually posted until they've been vetted through these sort of more intimate feedback loops. And I think I made clear how the disciplines differ in this regard. The biologists certainly share within those walled venues, but not in preprint servers. What are the barriers to sharing data? Now, of course, sure you should share your data. Well, when I'm finished with it, not all data are easily shared. It's not all it's not all the universe that nobody owns other than these federally funded telescopes and satellites. Not all data can just be uploaded, right? There's an incredible amount of time and work and by extension money that's required to make it readable and clean. Again, the costs, who are the costs going to be borne by? The publishers, the institution, the individual. I think with all the call of the data deluge and we're just going to throw it up there, I'm not quite sure people have really thought about and maybe I'm wrong, maybe there's a whole, I think the UK has spent an awful lot of time thinking about how are we going to preserve data. I think this is a very expensive undertaking, and I think universities are going to have to share it. But I also think faculty are going to have to acknowledge, be told, be supported to make their data available if it's going to become mandatory in some form or another. So in the social sciences, there's a lot of proprietary data, a lot of data that is subject to IRB and protection of human subjects. I can't share my data with you. I mean, I had to get permission to interview people, record it, and so on. There's no way I'm going to tell you what Provost X at this institution said about X. I can do it anonymously, but I have to clean those data so incredibly. And indeed, one of the reasons we have such a long report is we published a lot of the quotations. But that took a lot of our energy and time. In the health sciences, anonymity can be exceptionally important for individual health. Again, human subjects. And then whether or not commercial interests are going to come in and scrape those data and then make a profit off of them. Archaeology, this is something I hadn't even thought about. We can't give people GSP coordinates for our site. Pot hunters are going to come in there and destroy the site. So here's a kind of data that, that's archaeology or GIS, this is great. Well, probably not going to rush into that or should not. And then in archaeology, in so many fields, there's the heterogeneity of data. Archaeology is images, geological, pots, lithics, pollen. There's just such a variety of data. And then to try to make that heterogeneity homogeneous is a real challenge. And then engineering, for example. I'm just going through a few. I mean, the commercial and other impediments to sharing data. So in conclusion, scholars will read a piece of work once. Time is limited and coveted. I think it's important to distinguish open access journals, postprints of published material, say that you put up on an institutional repository, well-developed preprints, such as you might have at SSRN or an archive, and working papers published on a website, versus things like blogs and other casual, non-peer-reviewed postings. Should those count for tenure? Should they substitute for a journal article? These are questions that this provost and many of you in this room are going to have to think about. Sharing is complex. Building systems that assume early sharing ideas can be a waste of time and money if you're ignorant of a culture in a field. Young scholars are adopting the norms of their mentors. They are very conservative in archival publication choices. They are socialized from a very, very early age to succeed in a system that has pretty deeply embedded values. And I just think it's important not to confuse predictions about social scholarship. All scholarship is social. I mean, all scholarship has always been social. But don't confuse predictions that scholarship enabled by Web 2.0 with the hard realities of tenure and promotion requirements in highly competitive professional environments and the peer-reviewed publishing demands in those fields. Thank you.
Okay, the MC is arrived for questions. Yes.
Can you talk about your experience blind peer review and open peer review, advantages and disadvantages?
Well, I mean, here's another very important question. This seems to be a matter of taste. My sense is blind peer review is pretty well accepted as being the gold standard. There are going to be many complaints, and there are many complaints about it. Well, if you have it anonymous, then people can snipe at each other. And, but there are also arguments. You don't know if it's a woman, right? So you can't discriminate against an individual if you don't know their sex or race. So I think it's complex. This meetings I've been talking about regarding peer review, this is a topic that came up a lot. And Randy Scheckman there, who runs the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, number of provosts. There's really a concern that people aren't candid if it's public. And if you want candid advice, you need to give somebody some confidentiality. Now, I don't know. What's your opinion?
I agree.
Yeah. So I think it's a touchy subject. I don't think there's an easy solution. I will tell you that open peer review, in the sense that, well, just throw it out there. Some of the early, it's not, that hasn't been going on. There are a couple experiments that didn't work. Nature had Nature Proceedings, and it went down the tubes. There was just not enough interest in it. People can say, oh, that's an aberration, it just wasn't ready for prime time. I'm not quite sure about that. There was also one, another, I want to say, it wasn't astrophysics, it was something, it was another journal that tried it, it's no longer in existence. PLOS One is an interesting, there's a very low gate of entry to get into PLOS One. But the idea is, you throw it up there, and you get 8 million downloads from the biblical studies community because it's got the word Moses in it. I mean, and I'm being cynical there, and I really think you have to be very careful in this day and age of saying it got X number of downloads as some metric of value, because it's not how many times it was downloaded, it's how it was used, who it was used by. So I'm quite cynical about that, and I'll wear that badge, I don't care. But if you go on PLOS One, nobody's really commenting on those articles. They may be downloading them, but there's not a whole lot of conversation in those spaces that PLOS One is created for those. And so it just raises a question of, is that open peer review if nobody's peer reviewing it? And who are your peers? These are interesting, some of them philosophical questions. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'm not sure flying through figure out who the reviewer is.
Absolutely.
Language or whatever. But I've had two positive experiences where I have asked the publisher, would ask the reviewer if I could be in touch with that, because some of the issues they raised were helpful to me in rewriting or script. So I think that would be something for the public to encourage.
I think it's early days, and I think that the web allows a lot of interesting permutations of peer review. And when our paper comes out, we did a good review of some of these. A lot of them are, well, the jury's out. No, it's so new, we don't know. Of course, the monograph is a different beast than the journal, but I think there'll be some interesting experiments. There's one, and I don't know where Jamaica is, because this light is so bright, or if she's even here. Oh, hi. In atmospheric sciences, there's a journal, I believe, chemistry and where they have open, not so much, I don't know.
It's fully open access, and they rose this year, beginning of this year, they were our number 5 publisher, and by just about 3 weeks ago, they're our number 3 publisher.
Well, no, I'm not talking about open access to access it. I'm talking about the reviews being made public.
Oh, the reviews are public.
That's what I'm saying. That is a journal where I think that it's worked well. It's been done for some time. I will also add, I think that is a culture that is more sharing than molecular and cell biology. So that's why I come back to, you know, what culture are you talking about? Mm-hmm.
How much of this do you think is dependent on shifting patterns of funding for research, particularly in the sciences? There are $50 billion worth of R&D funding by the federal government in a year, so a tiny fraction of which is for basic sciences that sort that will be published in these research. So the question is about the extent to which the publishing activities in these large areas that don't necessarily get published, where information is not necessarily published in the literature, will ultimately have an impact on these behavioral patterns and others.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you rephrase that for me? Because I'm not sure. I don't want to answer something I don't think I understood.
Well, your study was based on information from 45
Okay.
I guess my question is about the fact that there is an enormous amount of research activity
Outside of those institutions.
outside of those institutions funded by the federal government, not even necessarily at universities.
Mm-hmm. NASA is a good example.
Right. To what extent are patterns different there? Will they ultimately have an effect on the sort of conclusions you draw?
Well, yes, the patterns are very different. We actually went and talked to some people at NASA because we were doing astrophysics, and we said, wow, that's different. They think very differently than the academic astrophysicists, although, of course, there's a lot of common ground. They have their own system of status seeking through publication, but their jobs aren't dependent on their publications. Their jobs are measured in different metrics, if I might. I do think there are lots of potentially insidious problems with commercial funding of academic research, and how that has and will affect how journals operate. I mean, there have been some evidence that articles are being ghostwritten, the veracity of the material in them is not necessarily very high because of the influence of some commercial pharmaceutical being one example. So I don't know. I'm not answering your question. I don't know the answer to your question. Will the academy change because there's this huge swath of research activity with different practices? Yeah.
Because of even within the funding coming out of federal government, there is an enormous range of different uses.
What do you think? What do you think the answer to that is? In what way?
In time, I think that ultimately there'll be a demand for quicker publication, for wider dissemination of information, as there's more and more of a focus on applications that are more.
And do you think the peer review process will change with that, or will that be taken along with it?
We know more than that.
Well, no, I mean, I'm just an explorer on the ride. I'm not quite clear where this is going.
Just to follow up on that, I think that's a really interesting point. When you're talking about class one, you're not talking about that as an example of open peer review, right? Because it's peer review sort of light, and they hate that expression sort of to describe it.
Open,
peer reviewing an article, they went to a system that said, all we're asking you to do as a reviewer is to say, this article meets certain criteria for being, public. And it's there's a little more to it than their second experiment in this regard, which is the PLOS Currents. And PLOS Currents
Yeah.
was developed, I think, exactly in response to what Robert
No,
said.
and it was HN1, what was it, H1N1, and, yeah.
PLOS Currents, influenza, and now they're moving into a few other areas, but hot topic areas where there's a real demand to get the science out fast in the community, to
That's a very good example.
an expert group board or editorial board where they didn't go to outside peer review, it's the board that makes the decision straight, yes or no, up or down, being public now or don't make public now. So I think we are seeing some models that are starting to emerge, definitely experimental. It's a really interesting trend.
No, and I think she answered your question. We crowdsourced that one.
I'm curious if, I've just been asked to review an article and they offered me $100 to do the review. That's unprecedented.
What's your field?
I'm in geography, but it was for a journal in economics, the American
Yeah, well, that's it, yeah, it's economics. They know the levers.
Exactly, they are smart that way, they understand incentives. I will do that review, but I'm curious, what are the implications? Because it is a cost on the university that I'm doing all these reviews that I'm not
Very
sure
good point.
is in the
This is
university.
not uncommon in economics. It is a direct response to the exhausted peer review pool. It's an incentive, and it's a way to get good people to do the reviewing that needs to be done, because it's getting more and more difficult to get reviewers. I think we may, in the book, in the university press world, they pay reviewers.
Do you think there's any downside?
I think there's a terrible downside. I think there's a you can run the risk of developing a peer review class of people who are self-selected and greedy. I'm taking that, I'm being extreme, I'm being provocative, but yes, I do, I think absolutely. It goes to the whole author pays model. We are asked about that granted some years ago, and there was not a lot of enthusiasm, particularly in the humanities, about an author pays model. And the humanities has a very, the business models for humanities journals are very different than the business models for science journals. And Mary Waltham has done of course Mellon paid for it, because Mellon is one of the primary funders in this space. The cost of a humanities journal article is much higher to produce than most articles in the sciences. I think it's, yeah, I think you're part of the problem now.
I will mark that down. Okay, maybe one more question before we break. Yes, July.
When I think about this, things were kind of almost in a way followed with publication issues like this, following in the way of the media. And think about what's happened with the media over the last 20 years or whatever. We used to have a few well-respected media resources, centers that information coming from them, we at least felt like it had gone through a lot of review, and that has proliferated into many, many media resources, some of which are respected, some of which are maybe not so much. And I think we're in a situation there where there's too much information, it can't all be reviewed, and it's going to depend on an educated population who can in some ways do their own review.
That's a terrible idea, I think. It's a scary idea.
But what I see is as long as we try to just hang on to something that isn't, we need to start thinking about solutions to this, as opposed to just letting it go, like what I see.
No, I completely agree with you.
So
I mean,
some
yeah.
things like the,
Plus.
I've heard about it, but I've not actually been into it. I think those kinds of open access sites are trying to address this issue by providing a solution, so it isn't just like,
No, but you know, I've heard complaints by Keith Yamamoto about professional editors at PLOS. And it goes to that, who are the gatekeepers, who do we want to be vetting our scholarship? Do we want it to be professional editors? Teenagers gone wild, we heard. Inexperienced, non-scientists, blah. Yeah, I think they probably have a point. You know, these are people who are way up in the field, and you know, they're not anti-open access, but they're concerned about what. I think your point, which is what's the quality of the landscape going to look like, and how do we keep control of it in the good parts.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Hope that was okay.
I want to give a guide, a roadmap to the concurrent sessions now. Room 1880 will have Jamaica Jones and Greg Colati talking about data centers as the new library stacks, what libraries can do to help make your academic work sustainable and discoverable. Room 1864 will have Don McCubry and Diane Harley on open educational resources, new models for classroom materials. And the Commerce Room will have Ann McCall and Heather Joseph on changing models in scholarly communication, implications for promotion and tenure. If you want to stick to the session that you signed up for, just check your name tag. Enjoy the afternoon.